This presentation is going to continue our conversation about assessment literacy. And again, I apologize for not being able to be there today. I understand it's been rescheduled, but this I think is a nice way of doing this. Also kind of modeling some things that you perhaps might want to do in your classroom, especially if you are considering flipping your classroom. So let's talk about assessment literacy. Remember, this is part of that big long-term plan, and this is specifically addressing goal number 2, increasing staff assessment literacy skills in order to make valid database inferences regarding student learning. So if we really are focusing our assessments and writing them in certain ways, we can really see what students know, we can target any deficiencies or accelerate students that need to be accelerated, and we can really maximize student learning. So that's why we're doing this. We're doing this because of goal number 2, and also it's really good for kids. So again, to remind you where we are in this assessment literacy process, we talked last time in that big staff meeting about clear learning targets. So deconstructing standards into targets. People showed me they really know how to do that well, so I'm not going to beat that into the ground. We are really on this second step right here, writing assessments aligned to targets. So that's what we're going to talk about today. Looking ahead a bit, after we write our assessments, then we can align our instruction to help students master what mastery looks like on the assessments, and we can analyze assessment data. So here's where we've been. Here's where we are, and we're going to spend some time here, and then here is where we're going. So again, clear targets. What makes a learning target clear? We were going to discuss and share out, but instead think about what makes a learning target clear. It's got to have clear language, and it has to show students what they have to do to master the learning target. The verb is very critical. Now again, you can have a verb like discuss, summarize, but you might have to explain to kids, hey, this is what I mean by summarize. When we summarize in this class, this is what it's going to look like. Make that clear to students so that way they know how to hit the target. Kids can hit any target they can see, and that's not moving around on them. So just a reminder, make sure that when you're deconstructing those standards into targets, it's clear to kids. So let's talk about aligning assessments to learning targets. And again, alignment to targets is critical. That's why I'm making a big deal about this. Assessments need to match the target. And then instruction, by the way, needs to match the assessment. If you're not assessing what the target says students can do, think about it. Later on, after the students take that assessment, you can't make or can't draw any valid inferences about what kids understand and what they don't understand. So remember, we're assessing for learning. We're also assessing the target, not around it. For example, I once knew a teacher that had a target that says I can summarize, I don't remember what they had to summarize, but they had to summarize something. I looked at the assessment, and the assessment talked about what the reading passage was about, different transition phrases. It had everything on there for the students except the assessment never asked them to summarize. So make sure you're actually assessing the target. So think about this. And you're going to stop me for a second and you're going to talk or think about what pair shows better alignment. So what I have here are two different learning targets. That's what LT stands for. But I have the same assessment. The first learning target, I can close read a short passage of text. That's the target you're going to give the kids. And then the assessment is students are asked to annotate 3 paragraphs of a complex text. That's one pair. The second pair, I can annotate a complex text to determine the central claim and generate further questions. Same assessment. Students are asked to annotate 3 paragraphs of a complex text. If you want to stop me now. Look at these two pairs and decide which pair shows better, notice I said better, not best, alignment. All right, so I'm assuming you've started me up again, and we're going to talk about this a little bit. If you look at this learning target, I can close read a short passage of text. If you know anything about close reading, annotation is one part of close reading. They have to read, reread, annotate, answer text-dependent questions. So this assessment is actually too small for the target. Or the other way to look at this is the learning target is too big for the assessment. So you either change the target about I can annotate a short passage of text to generate understanding, or you change the assessment to make it a little bigger. I like learning targets to not be so big. To me, this is too big of a learning target. Okay. If you look at the next pair, I can annotate a complex text to determine the central claim and generate further questions. This assessment only assesses part of the target. I can annotate a complex text. This assessment would need more. You'd have to actually ask them to determine the central claim and generate further questions. So this assessment's too small for the learning target. But you notice this is really general and this is much more specific. As a learning target, I would prefer this because kids know exactly what they're going to have to do. Close reading, that involves a lot of steps. They're going to have to know all those steps. Okay. Same thing, I give you 2 learning targets, this time math, and I want you to read them. I'm going to give you a few minutes to do that. And after you read them, you can just pause it. Which pair shows better alignment? So pause me, think about it, come back. All right, assuming you have read these, the learning target this time is the same. I can demonstrate how ratios can be simplified, but we've got 2 different assessments. This one, students are asked to write down the steps of ratio simplification. Well, this assessment depends on what you mean by demonstrate. Should you explain that to the students? Absolutely. If this is what you mean by demonstrate, then that's a perfect assessment. But if you mean by doing problems and actually simplifying problems, simplifying ratios, then that's not a good assessment. It doesn't match the target. Here, students are asked to simplify ratios in a variety of notations and explain their process each time in writing. I think this is a better assessment. You might have to have another learning target about I can explain my reasoning for simplifying ratios. Something like that, something to that effect. Okay. So really, in both of these pairs that I showed you, this one and this one, there really weren't perfect alignment there. However, I want you to know the assessment needs to match the target. The assessment can't be bigger than the learning target, and the learning target can't be bigger than the assessment. So when aligning assessments to targets, you're determining what students have to do to show mastery. So it should be very specific and very clear. If you're going to give kids feedback on what they need to do to master something, because you'll give them an assessment and they won't be at mastery. They need to know what mastery looks like. They also need to know where they are in respect to mastery, and they need to know how to close the gap. If you know the steps, they need to do this first, this second, this third. It's going to help you give formative feedback on assignments, which is really the purpose of the assignments that you give, to give them formative feedback so they know, hey, here's how you're doing towards mastery. I'm going to give you an example here, and I will make it bigger. This is an example of a scale that Marzano uses. I use these in my classroom. I wasn't happy with them. However, I'm showing you them because I think they do a good job with showing you, hey, I have delineated what mastery looks like. So really, 1 and 0 on a Marzano scale, that's really like with help, even with help, no success. 2 and 3 is where the good stuff is. 3 is actually proficiency. Student will write grade appropriate arguments to support claims with clear reasons. That's the actual standard, but then this is what they have to do to master that. So if a student has mastered the standard, they can do all these things. If they're doing 2.0, they do these things. But you notice this is the basics, and then this is the next step up. So basically, this is a proficiency scale. If you know the steps to mastery, then you can give formative feedback to students. Okay? That's going to help them. It shouldn't be a mystery as to how they get to mastery. Okay? So remember, it's all about helping students close that gap. The biggest thing you can do, research says, to help kids close that gap is to give them formative feedback. And you're going to be doing that on your assignments. All the assignments should be hooked into a learning target, and they should help students close that gap. We're going to talk more about assignments, though, next time. So let's practice. In the email, I've also attached 2 documents. I want to know how aligned your assessments are right now. So there's going to be a document that says awesome people, and there's going to be a document that says upgrade. If you think your alignment or your assessments are pretty aligned right now, pick the awesome one. Okay, I got a little activity for you. If you think my assessments could use a little bit of an upgrade, maybe be more aligned to my learning targets, you're going to choose the upgrade one. In order to write in it, you need to make a copy. So make a copy, follow the directions. Okay? What I want you to do is fill that out. Okay? And you can work with a partner, just put who you worked with on the top of the document. And I need you to share that back with me sometime before, I don't know, a week from today, let's say, because I want to see where we're at with our targets. Now, they're both math based, but don't be scared. It's third grade or fourth grade math, I think. So it's about division, multiplication. We can all handle that, I think. So if you could do that, send that back to me so I could take a look. I'd really appreciate it. Okay? And again, the whole reason we're doing this is so we can make sure our assessments are aligned to targets. Okay? Remember, we go from standards to clear targets to aligned assessments. We're going to talk next time about, hey, our instruction should match the assessment. We're giving better feedback because our assignments are aligned, and then we help students close the gap. Okay. All right. I had this, but don't worry about it now. We'll worry about it later. Okay. So what I need you to do by a week from today, which is today is November 7th. So just from a week from today, fill out those documents and then just share them back with me. All right. I'd greatly appreciate it. And again, thank you guys for your patience with me having to reschedule everything.